Welcome back, folks, to the next episode in our Boeing 787-8 and -10 tutorial series post AAU2 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. You know the drill by now. Hit like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you found these tutorial series really useful so far, certainly these newer episodes for the Dreamliner. You join us still in the climb out of London Heathrow for Manchester. A bit of a whistle-stop tour this because of the shortness of the sector and the fact that actually we'll be thinking about descent just as quick as we reach top of climb, which is coming up in just over 5 miles. We can ramp the speed up now because we are through 10,000 feet. And we can pop the aeroplane back into VNAV mode, so it'll accelerate itself and then continue to climb once again. While it's doing that, we're going to think about and discuss the approach. Now, in episode 1, when we're looking at configuring the aeroplane, cold and dark, getting the flight plan ready, all the rest of it on the ground at the gate, we looked at the arrivals here. Because this is a short sector, we've already put this in. So if you've missed that, go back, check it out. We're going to be on the Elvos 1 mic into Manchester, flight level 200 at Elvos. But actually we're going to be at flight level 180. Trent, VOR, and then into Cushy 311 degrees. When we get to Dane, we're going to be down at flight level 80, maximum speed, 1 to go, of 230 knots. And there is a published hold there if it's busy. Why are we flying into Manchester? Well, that's because there is a gap between Dane and the approach. And that gap is best displayed using this chart here. So from Dane, we are required to be vectored to the approach. And that would happen in real life with ATC, and it happens all the time on the VATSIM network. So what we need to do is work out how to get from Dane all the way to the approach up here at about 10 miles, where we need to be, according to the charts, at 3,500 feet. To do that, we're going to use heading mode, and we're just going to basically set a heading, initially maybe northbound 360 degrees, 350 degrees, to kind of try and work our way up to this 10 DME point. Or 12 DME point. We can do a few things to help us with that. Thankfully, Manchester has a VOR that is pretty much near the threshold to 2-3 right. We're going to go into the fix page and we're going to tune MCT, which is the Manchester VOR's 3-letter identifier. It asks, because there are multiple with the same 3-letter code, which one we want to choose. And we can check. So 13355 Manchester, the closest one should be the one displayed at the top. And we can see on the charts Manchester 13355 MCT. Good, it's a match. We can select that one. Then we're going to select 10 miles for a bearing. And we're going to set 4 miles as well. So we're going to get 2 fixed rings, one at 10 miles from the MCT VOR and one at 4 miles as well. And that little green dashed line on the nav display there is that 10 mile fixed ring already coming into view. Keep the heading bug aligned at all times. Top of descent in 40 miles. We've already done the descent forecast page earlier on. So again, if you've missed that in episode 1, go and check that out. And we also want to check now our legs page before the descent to make sure that we don't have any discontinuities that might be incorrect. Now for this arrival, we do have a discontinuity. We're not going to delete it because it's actually meant to be there. That gap on the charts from Dane to the approach that we mentioned a minute ago, where we're going to have to use heading mode to get to the ILS, that is why there's a discontinuity there, because there isn't a natural link in the LNAV or any of the nav data between Dane and the final approach. We need to be vectored to it, hence the discontinuity. So I'm going to leave that one in for this today. We need to look at the NavRad page to make sure the ILS is in, and actually there's nothing in there yet. So we're going to go back to the arrivals page, click it once again, and we need to go back into the arrivals at Manchester here. We can see ILS 23 right, Elvas 1 Mike, with no transition input. If we want to, we can just reselect it to remind the aeroplane. And in the NavRad page now, it's got 109.5 and the inbound course of 232 for Manchester. That's what we want. We're going to cross-check that with the charts. Really important we do this. So 232 degrees is the inbound course on the ILS. That matches what's on the FMS there, and 1095 is the frequency. So they both match. Jolly good. Next, we need to think about minimums. Depending on the ILS approach that we're going to be doing, our minimums might be entirely different. For the purpose of this, we're going to configure for a Cat 2 ILS, but we could rightly configure for a Cat 1 ILS as well, in which case we would use decision altitude of 449 feet. But for the Cat 2 ILS Category D aircraft, we're actually going to use a rad out of 105. If we were going to do a Cat 3 auto land, the decision height, the radio in the Boeing 787, would be 50. But we're going to set rad out 105, and then I'm going to hand fly the aeroplane in anyway. So we're going to flick the collar on radio, and then we're going to twizzle the knob to 105. This is really clunky. You'll notice there, very small little flick, and all of a sudden it jumped to 400 or so. So take your time, do it early, and you'll get it set without any issue. We also need our weather in Manchester, and the QNH currently 1012. So that's all set. Then we need to turn our attention once again to init-ref, index, approach, and we're going to put in our estimated landing weight from our OFP that we wrote down earlier on into the gross weight figure there. That will update every time you look at the page. It'll update with the latest figure. So if you forget it, don't worry. When you get to the approach, make sure you have this page open and select the flap setting you require. But I'm going to do a slight recalculation of what we estimate to have as a landing weight at Manchester, and we're going to set 152.7. If you're using a performance calculator like Bass Airplane Toolbox, now is the time to work that out and get your performance calculations put in, and it's telling us it wants flap 25 into Manchester for today. We'll select it, goes into the scratch pad, and then it goes into flap speed there. Now it's displayed at the bottom left of our primary flight display. What about holds? If we want to hold anywhere, ideally it's somewhere where there is a published chart. If it's incredibly busy or we're told to by ATC, we might have to hold at Dane. So for that today, we're going to press the hold button, we're going to find the waypoint we want to hold at, in which case it's Dane, and we're going to select it. It goes into the scratch pad at the bottom, and then we enter it into the bottom set of squares, and it brings up the hold input page. So we are now going to be flying to Dane, inbound course of 311 degrees. Let's put that in. In fact, it's already got an inbound course set correct at 310 with a right turn and a 1 minute leg time. So that's actually set perfectly. Target altitude and speed of 230. If we need to change that for any reason, then we can. But for this, because it's actually perfect, we're going to hit execute. And there's Dane with the hold on the nav display. We've now got a warning about resetting the MCP altitude. That's because we're imminent for top of descent. So we're going to scroll down to 8. And we're just going to leave it ready for now. VNav is active, LNav is active. Heading bug needs rotating back to our direction of travel. Lots to do, lots to discuss. And we can return back to the legs page. Auto brake is the next thing we need to think about. So with our performance calculator with VAS Airplane Toolbox, it's not only given us a flap 25 recommendation to be optimum, but it's also given us an auto brake setting that's recommended too. It's recommending auto brake 2 and both reversers, so we're going to use that. We'll set that nice and early before top of descent. So we've got all of our destination weather obtained, we've briefed for the approach, and we've set out all of the data as required. One final thing to do in the descent is to think about the missed approach procedure. And for that, we need to look at the approach charts. This specific approach, if we go around, it's written at the top for us, we need to climb to 3,500 feet straight ahead until passing 750 feet or 0 DME INN, 0.3 DME from the Manchester VOR inbound, whichever is the later, then turn right on track 356 degrees and as directed. There's a little pre-note there for separation from departing traffic, runway 23 left, expedite the climb through 750 before commencing the right turn on 356. Or, nice and simple, climb to 750 feet, then turn 356 degrees to 3,500, like the little dashed arrow shows there. Keep it simple. So we've reached top of descent, the aeroplane's not actually gone down. So we're going to push the button. It's already working to retard the throttles, idle the throttles, and it's going to put us into a fairly steep descent here. A really steep descent. So we're going to go early to vertical speed mode, and actually we're going to bring the speed down. So we'll aim for about 240 knots for now. As we've thought about and discussed entering the hold, we need to think about the entry speed, and that's 230 knots. Therefore, we're going to set a maximum of 230. I'm going to set 220. That's a little bit more reasonable. Holds can be really useful if you are higher than the profile needs you to be and you need somewhere to lose the altitude. Don't condense it and try and rush on approach, losing more altitude. That's when things go wrong. Use a hold. So if you're over Dane at 11,000 feet, but you need to be at 8,000 feet, that's exactly the sort of reason why you would enter a hold. So you could lose the altitude and the energy in that hold before then vectoring out to the final approach. So use the time in the hold wisely. But you don't always have to enter the hold. So if we were flying this approach anyway on VATSIM or offline, and we weren't going to demonstrate a hold, I would just go straight to Dane at flight level 80, heading north to head towards the approach. We're going to press cancel and recall just to see if we have any master cautions or warnings. And we're keeping an eye on our altitude and our speed. So what we can do here is use a little bit of speed brake. And reduce the vertical speed to help decelerate the aeroplane. It's quite a slippy aircraft, the Dreamliner, so there's quite a lot of energy management involved when flying it. We're gonna bring the range ring in the turn, following the heading bug with our direction of travel, and now we're closing in on Dane. It's proactively, as we decelerate, changing that 1 minute leg, so we can see that hold dynamically changing and shrinking. If we're flying faster, then it would go wider. The slower we go, the narrower it becomes. And that is to time the 1 minute legs that we've asked it to do, basically. Really, really clever what they've managed to do post AAU2. We can pop the seatbelt signs on, and through 10,000 feet, taxi lights on, runway turn-off lights on, landing lights can go on. Anti-ice as required, but we can leave it on automatic. The aeroplane will figure it out by itself. When we're at the desired speed target, what we can do is close the speed brakes, and we just adjust our vertical speed as required. Some of you might be watching thinking, hold on, why are we not descending on VNAV mode? That's because I find vertical speed just gives me that little bit more control and precision over the aeroplane effectively in the descent, so I can manage the energy a little bit better, and I can manage the descent a little bit more accurately to how I want the descent to go. One to go. 225, so we're at a good entry speed for the hold. And we're going to enter and fly most of one circuit, and then we're going to show you how to activate the exit hold function to leave the hold at Dane. From there, we're going to dive straight into heading mode and vector from Dane to that final approach fix. Now, if you were to delete the discontinuity, it would basically draw a line from Dane straight to Charlie Foxtrot 23 right there, which could be a really useful way of helping you work out roughly your direction of travel to head from one waypoint to the next. But if you follow that precisely, it gives you far too much of a strong and a tight turn onto final approach there. So if you do, you might need to find that you need to come wider away from your little path to keep it all neat. Leveling off at 8,000. And in the hold, we're going to expect a right turn from Dane, outbound 131 degrees for 1 minute, and then a turn back into Dane, following this magenta LNAV path. So here we go, entry to the hold. Monitor this closely, folks. Certainly if you're on VATSIM, make sure it's flying the hold exactly as needed, and if you can't, if you notice it's starting to go wrong, be proactive and intervene. Let's turn the heading knob now all the way round to 131. That's where we're going to be heading next. There we go. And it's flying this fairly nicely. So the next question is, how do you exit the hold? Once the hold is active, even in the legs page, you will now see an option at the bottom saying exit hold. All you've got to do is press it, and now it's going to prepare to exit the hold. If for whatever reason you press it and you think, my god, I shouldn't have done that, I need to stay in the hold still, you can just click it and it will cancel the exit, and it will continue to then fly the hold for you. So there is a way back if you click it by mistake. Round we go for the outbound leg. If we get told by ATC on VATSIM to leave the hold now, we would be given a heading most likely and an altitude to achieve. So in which case we would just turn the heading knob to the required heading, and then we'd press heading select to leave the hold entirely. If you're in the hold and you get told to descend through different altitudes, say from 10,000 to 8,000, again you would just move the MCP altitude selection to the required altitude, and you can either click it and get it to do it in VNav, or you can use vertical speed mode to keep it nice and smooth, say 800 to 1,200 foot per minute rate of descent, something like that. Your preference. 310 degrees. For the next turn, as we now begin to leave the hold. And we want to think about the altitude required for the commencement of the approach. So that's 3,500 feet by about 12 DME, certainly at 10 DME because that's where the glide slope begins. So we're going to set 3,500. For that, flick the collar to auto, and it'll allow you to step with smaller increments. Like so. Take a note of your minimum clean speed. That's where it says up there. So we're just above that at the moment. If we were to decelerate to it, to go below that even more, certainly safely, we would need to think about extending flaps. And at that speed, you could get away with flap 5, and then you could bring the speed down slowly as you begin to extend the flaps even more and you get closer to the approach. Find a suitable time for the approach to arm the spoilers. We'll discuss all of that in the next episode. One final comment just before we leave the hold and head to the approach is a tip that I always talk about on live streams, and that is not only think about the approach, but think about what you're going to do with the aeroplane when you're on the runway, where you want to get off. So runway 23 right, which is here, we're going to touch down pretty much where it says Mike, roughly. That's where the touchdown zone is, approximately at the airport, near to where that windsock icon is as well, actually, rather handily. Decelerating then with auto brake 2 and full reverse, we're either going to achieve around 40 to 50 knots at Bravo Delta to vacate on that high speed exit, or Alpha Echo. Either way, it's going to be a right turn on Alpha. If we're going to leave at Bravo Delta, it'd be a right turn on Bravo. And then we need to think about parking and the stands and that sort of stuff. So be guided by your ATC. For those of you on VATSIM, if you're offline, find a suitable parking spot. You do have charts for that though as well to help you. Now from Dane, we're going to go vertical speed mode. Just at 800 foot per minute for now, and I'm going to bring that speed down to 220, and we're going to set a heading required. As we mentioned earlier, about 360, didn't we? Look, that's not quite enough. We're going to heading select mode now, and we're going to self vector 015 or 020 actually. Let's do that. Note the tailwind. So as we now commence a turn northbound, that tailwind is going to push us 25 knots closer towards that approach, quicker than perhaps we otherwise would like to. So think about energy management. You might need to bring your speed down a little bit more. You might need to bring that vertical speed up a little bit more as well. Increase that vertical speed downwards to 1300 instead of 800 foot per minute, that sort of thing. Thankfully this has the little banana that helps you work that out. But we're going to set our minimum clean speeds, and as we get a little bit lower and slower, we get through transition altitude, transition level, sorry, we're going to press standard pressure, because we've already pre-tuned that QNH for Manchester, haven't we? Lap 25 and a reference speed of 136. Now's a really good time to head to the init ref page and have a little final check of this. So 136 flap 25. It's a slightly different gross weight to what we estimated, only by a little bit though, so we don't need to change that because that is correct. And now we're going to leave that page on. Let's bring in a little bit of flap to help with the energy management. So by increasing the flaps and slats, we increase the drag on the airframe and the aircraft, helping us to decelerate even more. And we can look to come down to about 200 knots. Flap 5. Note VNE. Barb pole there has come down even more. And we're going to come right to 025 degrees now, just to try and maybe smooth out this turn. We'll bring the range ring of our nav display in. In fact, 030 would be better. Caution the terrain there. For that, the terrain map might be handy. And we'll continue the descent down to 3,500 feet. We'll set up for 180 knots. Arming the speed brake, checking the overhead panel, any warning signals and so on. Seatbelt signs on, cabin chime alerted, lights and signs set as required. Almost at 3,500, thinking about the approach that we've already briefed for. That's it for this episode. Join us on the next one for this ILS approach with a hand-flown short final. Hope you're enjoying the series. Share your thoughts, tips, tricks, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next episode. Thanks for watching.